This is a fictional story created purely for entertainment and inspirational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, businesses, or events is entirely coincidental. The lights of Royal Harvest Grill glimmered against the busy city night, pulling in customers like moths to a flame. On the surface, it was everything a successful restaurant should be. Polished tables, gold-printed menus, and a soft jazz tune drifting in the air. Families walked in with laughter. Couples leaned close over candlelit tables, and servers rushed by with trays of steaming dishes. To any outsider, this was the picture of perfection. But beneath that shining surface, something was rotting. Not just in the freezers, where old meat and vegetables sat waiting to be reheated, but in the very spirit of the restaurant itself. Staff who were supposed to carry Marcus Clay's dream forward had begun cutting corners, chasing quick profits instead of protecting the trust of their customers. And Marcus, the man who built this empire with blood, sweat, and faith, was about to uncover the truth in the most shocking way possible. Marcus Clay was no ordinary businessman. He was tall, broad, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through storms and survived them. His dark skin shone like polished mahogany under the light, and his eyes, sharp, unflinching, always carried both warmth and authority. People noticed him when he walked into a room, but more than that, they felt his presence. He was a leader by nature, though leadership had not been handed to him easily. Marcus grew up in one of the city's roughest neighborhoods. He knew hunger not just as an empty word but as a gnawing ache in his belly that had followed him through childhood. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and his father had disappeared long before Marcus could remember his face. There were nights when dinner was nothing but stale bread and tap water. Those nights forged a promise in Marcus's heart. If he ever had the power, he would feed people honestly. He would never compromise with the thing that mattered most. Food that was clean, safe, and made with pride. Years later, that promise became the foundation of his success. Marcus started small, pushing a food cart on street corners, serving hot sandwiches to construction workers and night shift janitors. He worked in the freezing cold, in the burning heat, saving every dollar until he had enough to open a tiny diner. From that diner came bigger dreams, and eventually Royal Harvest Grill was born, a high-end restaurant known for quality, service, and integrity. Critics praised it. Families loved it. Marcus became a local hero, a black entrepreneur who had built his way from nothing to the top. But Marcus never let pride blind him. He knew success could be fragile. And lately whispers had begun to creep in, whispers that made his chest tighten with dread. It began with customer complaints. Some said the stew tasted off. Others claimed the chicken wasn't fresh. A few even reported stomach troubles after eating seafood pasta. Marcus listened but hoped it was coincidence. Every restaurant faced finicky customers. But the complaints didn't stop, they grew. Then one evening, his longtime supplier and childhood friend, Darius, delivered a warning. "Marcus," Darius said quietly, leaning across the desk in Marcus's office, "I delivered fresh produce to your restaurant on Monday. By Thursday, some of it should still have been fine. But word is, your staff are serving food that's past its safe date. Man, they're taking shortcuts. You need to check what's happening back there." Marcus felt a heavy weight sink into his stomach. He wanted to believe it was impossible. He trusted his staff. He had celebrated holidays with them, laughed with them, shared late-night shifts with them. They were family, or at least that's what he thought. But if what Darius said was true, it wasn't just carelessness. It was betrayal. That night, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at the walls decorated with awards and framed photographs. Newspaper clippings praised him as the man who turned struggle into a feast. Community leaders had given him plaques for service, for honesty, for excellence. Yet none of those meant anything if the food being served under his name was spoiled. None of it mattered if children and families were walking into his restaurant only to leave sick and disappointed. The clock ticked in the silence. Marcus pressed his fists against the desk. If his staff were truly serving rotten food, then his entire empire was built on lies, and he would not allow that. There was only one way to know for sure. He would go undercover. Not as Marcus Clay, the respected owner. Not as the boss they recognized and feared. He would step into his own restaurant as a stranger. Just another tired man looking for a meal. Only then could he see the truth with his own eyes. The next evening Marcus prepared for the role. He pulled on an old hoodie, faded jeans and scuffed sneakers. A baseball cap shadowed his face. In the mirror, he no longer saw the polished businessman. He saw someone invisible, someone the staff wouldn't notice, someone they might even dismiss. When he walked through the doors of Royal Harvest Grill that night, nobody recognized him. The dinner rush had begun, and servers bustled around carrying plates. The warm glow of chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. Couples laughed, glasses clinked, and for a moment, Marcus almost wished everything really was perfect. But he knew better than to trust appearances. He slid into a corner booth where he could watch without being watched. A young waitress approached him, her uniform wrinkled, gum popping in her mouth. She didn't smile. She didn't even greet him properly. "Yeah. You eating or what?" she muttered, bored already. Marcus stared at her, his jaw tightening. He had trained his staff to welcome every guest with warmth, to treat customers like family. This wasn't just rudeness. It was a warning sign. "I'll have the house special," he said, lowering his voice to sound rougher, less polished. The waitress scribbled on her pad, didn't bother repeating the order, and walked away. "No thank you. No, I'll be right back." Just indifference. When the food arrived, it looked fine at first glance. The steak glistened under the low light. The vegetables looked colorful. But Marcus had an eye trained by years of experience. He noticed the edges of the steak had turned gray, a sign it wasn't fresh. The vegetables gave off a faint sour smell. He cut into the steak and tasted it. Immediately his heart sank. The flavor was metallic, bitter at the edges. This wasn't fresh meat. This was spoiled food, disguised and plated as if nothing was wrong. Marcus forced himself to swallow, his hands trembling beneath the table. He looked toward the kitchen. Through the swinging doors, he saw chefs moving without care, laughing, tossing ingredients sloppily. One of them pulled a plastic tub from the corner and dumped its contents onto a sizzling pan. Marcus recognized the tub. It was produce from Darius's last delivery. By now, that produce should have been thrown away. Instead, it was being recycled onto paying customers' plates. Richard's face turned red, his jaw tight. "Sir, with respect, you weren't here to see how hard we work. You think you know what it's like to keep this place running. Staff shortages, bills piling up, suppliers raising costs. Sometimes we have to make compromises." Marcus's eyes burned into him. Compromises? You call poisoning children a compromise? You call serving rot to paying families a business strategy? Richard stammered, sweat beading his forehead. "It wasn't like that." "Don't," Marcus snapped, his voice echoing off the restaurant walls. "I built this place from the ground up. I scrubbed dishes until my fingers bled. I worked double shifts while sleeping in my car. Don't stand there and tell me about struggle, I lived it. The difference is, I never let my struggle become someone else's suffering." The staff shuffled nervously. One of the cooks, a young man with tired eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Clay, it's true. Richard told us to keep using old stock. Said we couldn't afford to throw it away. Some of us tried to speak up, but he shut us down." Richard spun toward him, furious. "That's a lie." But Marcus raised his hand. "Enough. The truth has a way of coming out." He turned slowly, letting his gaze sweep across every face in the room. "Do you all understand what's at stake? Every plate you serve carries my name. Every bite a customer takes is a reflection of me. If you serve dishonesty, if you serve poison, you're not just betraying me. You're betraying every person who trusted us." The room was silent, heavy with shame. Marcus took a step closer to the kitchen door. "Show me the freezer." Richard's face blanched. "Sir, there's no need." "I said," Marcus growled. "Show me the freezer." The staff exchanged uneasy glances as Richard hesitated, then reluctantly led Marcus into the back. The kitchen smelled faintly of bleach, but it couldn't mask the stench seeping from the cold storage. When Marcus pulled open the freezer door, his stomach lurched. Inside, plastic-wrapped meat sat gray and slimy with frostbite. Seafood packages sagged with melted ice, their labels months expired. Vegetables wilted in crates, some already crawling with mold. Marcus's fists clenched so hard his knuckles whitened. "This," he hissed, "is what you've been feeding my customers?" One of the chefs looked away in shame. Another muttered under his breath, "We didn't have a choice." Marcus spun toward him. "There's always a choice. You could have walked out. You could have called me. But you chose silence. You chose the easy way, and in doing so you risked lives." The staff trailed back into the dining area behind Marcus, the weight of his anger pressing down on them like a storm. Customers had begun to notice the commotion, whispering from their tables, watching the drama unfold. Marcus didn't care. Let them see. Let the world see what had been hidden behind polished menus and smiling facades. He turned once more to Richard, his voice low and cold. "You were trusted to protect this place. Instead, you poisoned it from the inside. You don't deserve to wear the title of manager. In fact," Marcus's jaw tightened, "you don't deserve to work here at all." Richard's eyes widened. "You're firing me. Just like that." Marcus leaned in, his words sharp as knives. "No, I'm holding you accountable. This isn't about money, Richard. This is about respect. Respect for the people who come here, respect for the food, and respect for the dream that built these walls. You forgot all of that. And for that you're done." Richard's face twisted in fury, but he didn't dare speak. He grabbed his apron, tore it off, and stormed out the front door under the watchful eyes of staff and customers alike. For a long moment the room was silent. Marcus stood tall, the storm within him still raging but focused now, sharper. He scanned the faces of the remaining staff. "This restaurant will not die because of greed. Not while I still draw breath. You have a choice. Either you rise to the standard this place was built on, or you walk out the door like Richard. There is no middle ground." The staff shifted uneasily, but no one moved. A few nodded hesitantly, determination flickering in their eyes. Others still looked guilty, but Marcus knew fear had shaken them awake. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. This was only the beginning. One man had fallen, but rot had roots deeper than a single manager. Marcus would need to dig them all out, one by one, until the restaurant was clean again. And tomorrow, he vowed, the real purge would begin. The restaurant was unusually silent after Richard's departure. The front door slammed behind him, leaving an echo that seemed to linger in the air like smoke after a fire. Customers sat frozen, forks mid-air, eyes wide with disbelief. The staff stood scattered, nervous and pale, as if the very walls might collapse around them. Marcus drew a deep breath, forcing calm into his voice. "Everyone gather around." The employees shuffled toward him. Servers, cooks, even the dishwasher with soap still clinging to his hands. Their faces were masks of fear, guilt, and quiet rebellion. Marcus stood tall, his presence commanding. "What happened here tonight is more than mismanagement. It's betrayal. A betrayal of me, yes, but more importantly, a betrayal of every single customer who trusted us with their health." One of the waitresses, a young woman named Carla, stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Clay. Sorry. I knew things weren't right. But Richard, he said if we complained we'd lose our jobs. Most of us have families, kids. We couldn't afford to be fired." Marcus's expression softened for a brief moment. He understood the fear of hunger, of bills piling up, of the weight of survival pressing down. He had lived that life. But his tone hardened again as he replied, "I understand fear. But fear does not excuse feeding poison to children. Fear does not excuse silence while this place rots from within. There is a line, and you all crossed it. An older chef raised his hand, his voice trembling. It wasn't always like this. At first Richard made small cuts, switching suppliers, reusing things. We thought it was temporary. But then it got worse. The bad meat, the spoiled fish. We wanted to say something, but he had authority. He reminded us you weren't here. That you didn't care anymore. The word struck Marcus like a blade. Didn't care. He had bled for this restaurant, sacrificed years of his life for it. And yet, in his absence, the people he trusted had painted him as indifferent. His jaw tightened. I wasn't absent because I didn't care, Marcus said coldly. I was absent because I trusted. And tonight, I see that trust was misplaced. The employees lowered their heads in shame. Marcus pointed toward the freezer. Anyone who thought it was acceptable to serve what's in there, step forward now. If you can look me in the eye and defend it, do it. No one moved. The silence was suffocating. Finally, a timid busboy shuffled forward. He couldn't have been older than 19. His voice cracked as he spoke. I did it, sir. I served dishes from the spoiled batch once. I didn't know how to say no. Thought maybe you knew. That maybe it was okay. Marcus studied the boy, his trembling hands, the fear in his eyes. He wasn't angry at him. Not really. The boy was too young, too desperate. He was a symptom, not the disease. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, ignorance is not the same as malice. But you need to learn something tonight. Silence in the face of wrong makes you complicit. Never forget that. The boy nodded rapidly, relief flooding his face. Marcus let him step back. Then Marcus's gaze fell on two senior cooks, men who had been with the restaurant for years. They avoided his eyes, shifting uncomfortably. You too, Marcus said firmly. Did you serve spoiled food knowingly? The older of the two swallowed hard. Yes, sir. We did. We knew it was wrong, but Richard gave the orders. We obeyed. Marcus's voice sharpened. Obedience is no excuse. When you choose obedience over integrity, you become part of the rot. You betray not just me, but yourselves. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then his verdict came swift and final. You're fired. Both of you. Get your things and leave. The cooks froze, stunned. One opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus's glare silenced him. They removed their aprons slowly, shame heavy in their steps as they walked out the door. The staff watched wide-eyed. The message was clear. Marcus wasn't bluffing. He wasn't here to lecture. He was here to cleanse. Marcus turned back to the remaining employees. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Anyone else who thinks they can cut corners, risk lives, and hide behind excuses, leave now. Walk out that door. I won't stop you. But if you stay, understand this. Things will change. And I will be watching. The silence stretched, thick as smoke. A couple of waiters glanced at each other nervously, but no one moved. Finally Marcus nodded. Good. Then we begin again. He walked to the center of the dining room, his voice rising so even the customers could hear. This restaurant will not be defined by greed or shortcuts. From this day forward, honesty, safety, and excellence will be our standard. No exceptions. A murmur spread among the diners, some nodding in approval, others whispering in awe. A few even began to clap quietly, their applause swelling until the entire room echoed with it. For Marcus, it wasn't about applause. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen. His dream, his pride, his name. But deep inside, he knew the battle wasn't over. He had cut away some of the rot, but shadows still lingered. Tomorrow he would dig deeper. Tomorrow more would face judgment. And tomorrow more would be fired. The night dragged on, heavy with tension. Some customers stayed, curious to watch the drama unfold. Others quietly paid their bills and slipped out, whispering about what they had witnessed. By midnight, the restaurant was nearly empty, except for Marcus and the staff that remained. He stood in the middle of the dining floor, surveying the space that once represented his dream. Tonight it felt different. The walls seemed tainted, the air heavy with betrayal. But beneath it all, there was a spark, faint but alive. Oh! Marcus clapped his hands once, sharp. All right. Those of you who are still here, you've made your choice. But before we move forward, there's one more thing I need to know. The employees exchanged nervous glances. Was Richard the only one? Or are there others? Others who took bribes, cut corners, or covered up lies? If you have something to confess, now is the time. The silence stretched painfully. Then Carla, the waitress who had spoken earlier, raised her hand. Her voice trembled. Mr. Clay, there's something you should know. Richard wasn't alone. He had help. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Go on. She swallowed hard. The head bartender, Sam. He's been watering down drinks, pocketing the difference. He told us Richard approved it. And sometimes he'd take tips from the servers, saying it was for the house. All eyes turned to Sam. He stood frozen, his face pale. That's ridiculous, he stammered. She's lying. Trying to save herself. Carla shook her head fiercely. No, sir. It's true. Ask anyone. Several staff members nodded reluctantly. Marcus's expression darkened. He stepped toward Sam, his voice low and steady. Is this true? Sam's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but found none. His shoulders sagged. Fine, he muttered. Yes, I did it. But only because Richard said we had to make up for losses. Marcus's voice thundered. Losses. You stole from your coworkers. You cheated customers. You stained this place with your greed. Get out. You're finished here. Sam tried to argue, but the fury in Marcus's eyes silenced him. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. The staff watched in stunned silence as he disappeared into the night. Marcus turned back to the remaining employees. His voice softened, though the steel remained. What happened here tonight will never happen again. I won't allow it. This restaurant is more than walls and tables. It's a promise. A promise that every person who walks through that door will be treated with dignity, honesty, and respect. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you stay with that promise in your heart. If you can't leave now. No shame. No anger. But choose. The staff stood frozen. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. Carla stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We'll do better, Mr. Clay. We want to make this right. Others murmured agreement. The dishwasher, still in his soapy apron, raised his hand awkwardly. I just want to work honest. That's all. Marcus's chest tightened, not with anger but with something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. He nodded. Then let's rebuild. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, painting the restaurant's sign in golden light. Word of the previous night's events had already begun to spread. Customers posting online about the owner who returned undercover, the staff who had been fired on the spot, the promise of change. By noon, curious diners lined up outside, eager to see if the rumors were true. Inside, Marcus stood with his staff, sleeves rolled up, ready to work beside them. They scrubbed the kitchen, threw out every ounce of spoiled food, and restocked with fresh supplies. The freezer, once a tomb of decay, now gleamed with life. Marcus moved from table to table that day, serving customers himself, shaking hands, smiling, a real smile this time. And as the restaurant buzzed with energy, he knew the storm had passed. But he also knew this. Vigilance would be his shield. Never again would he trust blindly. Never again would he allow rot to grow in the shadows. His dream had been bruised, scarred, but not broken. It was stronger now. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those we trust the most. Marcus learned this the hard way. But he also learned something else. True leadership is not about avoiding storms, but facing them head-on, no matter the cost. His story is a reminder to all of us, whether in business, in family, or in life, that integrity is not optional. The easy road, the shortcuts, the silence in the face of wrong, they always lead to decay. But courage rebuilds. Marcus rebuilt his dream, not by ignoring the rot, but by cutting it out at the root. And in doing so, he proved that sometimes the only way to save something worth loving is to fire everyone who poisons it.